Okay, this is the third in our 3 series on short run costs, and in this time we're going to look at labor output and understand how labor productivity contributes or is the essential component of costs. So let's start off. If we hire 0 workers, of course we have nothing being produced. When we hire the first worker, output increases to 5. So let's say this is a coffee shop and this is the output per hour per worker. So when there's 1 worker hired, they can produce 5 cups of coffee per hour. Therefore, the marginal product of that first worker is 5 units and the average product is 5 units. Hire a second worker and output increases to 12. Therefore, marginal product is 7 because the output went from 5 to 12. So the marginal product of hiring that second worker is 7, and the average product is 6. Now, one thing to keep in mind, we are assuming that all workers are the same. We're not going to say that the second worker is more productive than the first one. We're assuming they're all the same. It's just output increased for a reason we'll explain in just a second. Hiring the third worker, the number of coffee cups produced per hour is now jumped to 21. So the marginal product of the third worker is 9. The average product is 7. That's 21 divided by 3. And we can keep going down through 7 workers, and we see that originally output had increased at an increasing rate. It increased by 5, then 7, then 9, and then it begins increasing at a decreasing rate. It goes from 21 to 28, so it increased by 7, 28 to 33, it increased by 5, 33 to 36, that's 3, on down to 37. And what we're seeing is output increasing at an increasing rate at first, and then increasing at a decreasing rate afterwards. And the question is why? For the first part, why does it increase at an increasing rate? Is the gains from specialization. If it's one person working by themselves, they have to take the order, make the change, grind the coffee beans, brew the coffee, steam the milk, pour it, spread whatever they spread, cinnamon, chocolate, whatever it is, bust the tables. They're doing everything. Think of an auto manufacturer, and one person takes care of the tires. They have to take the rubber tire, put it on the wheel, take the wheel, put it on the hub, then take the lug nuts and put them on, and then tighten the lug nuts all by themselves. Hire a second worker in the coffee shop, and they can specialize. One takes the order and busses the table, the other one grinds the coffee, brews the coffee, and output increases by more than double, and that's because they specialize. So the same thing with the tire. Go back to the tire production now. One person takes the tire, puts it on the wheel, rolls it over to the second person who puts it on the hub, and then tightens the lug nuts. Their output is going to increase by more than 2 times. Hire the third worker, and again, there's even greater specialization. So these are the gains from specialization at first. And just as more workers are hired at first, they can specialize. A couple things. They become more adept at doing one task as opposed to doing 5 or 6 tasks. Number 2, they're not having to move around to different stations in order to perform those tasks. So output is going to increase at an increasing rate. Then we see that it increases at a decreasing rate after the third worker is hired. And that's due to diminishing marginal productivity of labor. Remember, we're assuming here that we're holding fixed costs fixed. All the fixed costs in this model here are going to be fixed, so there are no changes in terms of the plant size or the number of machines. And as you add more and more workers to a fixed amount of capital, output will start increasing at a decreasing rate because workers bump into each other, there's less to do, and that's the diminishing marginal product of labor. And we can draw this out. We'll look at the total product curve. This is simply 0 workers, 0 cups are produced. At 5 workers, at 1 worker it's 5, at 2 workers it's 12, 21, 28, 33, 36, and 37. And here's our marginal product curve. Notice that it's increasing at first up to the third worker, and then it's decreasing after that. And again, the gains from specialization from 1 to 3 workers, and then diminishing marginal product of labor beyond the third worker. And then the average product of labor is increasing at first, and then decreasing. Notice that as long as the marginal is above the average has to be increasing. When the marginal falls below the average, then the average begins decreasing. And that's a pretty simple explanation. If a baseball player is batting 300 and one day they go 4 for 4, so the marginal that day it's 1,000, then their overall batting average is going to increase above 300. If they go 0 for 4 to 0, the marginal is below the average, it'll fall. So as long as the marginal is above the average will be increasing. Once the marginal falls below the average will be decreasing. Therefore, the marginal intersects at the average at the peak of the average product of labor. So using the example we've just discussed, let's add some money to it. Let's quantify it or monetize it. And let's say the fixed costs are $15, and we're going to assume labor is $10 an hour. We can hire as many workers as we want for $10 an hour. And so we looked and we hired 1 worker, 2 workers, 3 workers, and now we're going to hold fixed costs at $15 per hour. And so we can look at this by looking at the labor input, how much output is produced, the total cost, the marginal cost, the average fixed cost, the average variable cost, and then the average total cost. When 0 workers are hired, nothing is produced. We're not hiring anything, so no variable costs. The only thing we have are fixed costs, which are going to be $15. We hire the first worker, it's $10 an hour. That drives the total cost up to $25. Our fixed costs are $15. Our variable costs are $10, so that's $25. And we can divide the fixed costs and the variable costs by quantity to get average fixed costs, average variable costs, and then, of course, average total cost. We want to look also at marginal cost, because this is going to come into the marginal product of labor. Output increased by 5 cups, and at the same time, costs increased by $10. So marginal cost is the change in total cost divided by the change in output. 10 divided by 5 is equal to 2, so the marginal cost of that first through 5th cup of coffee is $2. We hire the second worker, output increases by another $10, so that's $35. Marginal cost is now $1.43. We went from 5 to 12 cups of coffee. The cost went from 25 to 35, so 10 divided by 7 is $1.43. Average fixed costs are, again, the fixed cost divided by quantity. Notice that they are continually decreasing, and it will decrease through time. We'll take a look at this. Average variable costs are falling at first, and then average total costs are decreasing. Hire the third worker, output increases to 21, total costs increase by another 10. So again, the change in total cost is 10, divided by change in output is 9. 10 divided by 9 is $1.11. That's our marginal cost. And we continue doing this through 7 units of labor, producing 37 cups of coffee per hour. And we can see that our marginal cost is decreasing at first, up to the third worker or the 21st cup of coffee, and then it begins increasing. Keep in mind, we talked about marginal product of labor was increasing at first and then decreasing after the third worker. As long as the marginal is above the average will be increasing. Once the marginal falls below the average will be decreasing. So we look at that with the average variable cost and the average total cost. Notice that average fixed cost is continually decreasing throughout the range of output. As we discussed, you're spreading more and more of those fixed costs over more and more units of output. They will have to be decreasing. And so here are our cost curves. Here's marginal cost. It's decreasing at first up to the 21st cup of coffee, and then it begins increasing. The average fixed costs are decreasing throughout the whole range of output, and here are the average variable costs. They are decreasing at first until it intersects with the marginal cost, and then it begins increasing, and then here is our average total cost. Again, decreasing, and then it increases once after it intersects with the marginal cost curve. Now, how does this relate to the marginal productivity of labor? Well, we have the marginal product on the top, and we see that here, when the marginal product of labor is at its peak, marginal cost is at its minimum. And when the average product of labor is at its peak, the average variable costs are at its minimum. And the reason for that is, as you hire each worker, the costs stay the same. It costs me $10 per worker, but output increases at an increasing rate. Therefore, the marginal cost is falling at first. Once I go ahead and we get beyond that point of against the specialization and we move into the area of diminishing marginal product of labor, then we hire more workers at the same rate, but the production increases at a decreasing rate. Therefore, the marginal cost is going to begin increasing. And this will be the end of this one. We will continue on with long run costs later.